Today, as we continue our comparison and interpenetration of the Buddhist and the Christian look at happiness and joy, I want to take a look at the concept of controlling our emotions. Many of us who come from the Christian perspective might say that, we really don't have too much control over our emotions. For example, when we're suffering from pain that's due to an illness or due to an injury, really how much control do we have over that? From the Buddhist perspective, however, a little bit of a different take on that. Buddhists would say, we have more control over our emotions than we think we do. And so take a look at this sort of contrasting aspect of the emotional aspect of our lives. To consider other people and to take a compassionate attitude towards them. Many Buddhists would say that that is really the source of happiness. Because why do we suffer? What is the root of suffering? From the Buddhist perspective, the root of suffering is too much self-centered thinking. So we concentrate too much on ourselves and on our own issues and our own involvements and things. That's when we suffer the most. We just become so focused on, woe is me, and all these bad things are happening to me. This is terrible. This is awful. And, that's when the real suffering takes place from the Buddhist perspective. And when we start to take that self-centeredness and turn it around and look at others, and we become more compassionate, more understanding, and so our suffering really lessens because we're more focused on how can I help somebody else, not what I'm going through, not my own suffering, but what can I do to reach out to another person, to help another person, to assist another person. And so my focus is then not on me and woe is me, but it's a focus on what can I do for the other person. And so there's a big change there in terms of the emphasis. And there's a similarity, I would say, with the Christian perspective. We also are concerned about others, and we want to be compassionate. So there's a kind of a good interpenetration there of the Christian and the Buddhist aspect in terms of it. But very outstanding in terms of Buddhism is the sense of the suffering, the elimination of suffering in that sense, because we're focused on the other person. An example that somebody would use is a person who suffered intense abdominal pain. And they had to travel for 2 hours to get to the hospital. This particular individual was a Buddhist. And he saw a man who was lying on the ground. And this particular man looked very sick. And he thought about this man. And he thought about the sickness that this man had. And even though he was suffering from this intense abdominal pain, he forgot it. It left him because he was so focused on the pain of the other person. So from the Buddhist perspective, we can really have a lot more control over our suffering than we are used to thinking. And we can focus more on another person. So our pain actually becomes lessened, as we can see in this specific example from this Buddhist man who was traveling. He had this pain, but when he saw the man who was suffering, the pain literally disappeared. We have to take care of ourselves. The Buddhists would say, without selfishly taking care of ourselves. Interesting distinction, right? So it's important to take care of ourselves. God would want us to take care of ourselves. It's important to do that. But at the same time, we shouldn't be selfishly taking care of ourselves. And to the extent where we're so much taking care of ourselves that we forget about the other. And I think that's an important distinction. So for the Buddhist, yes, take care of yourself, but not to that extent where it becomes a selfish absorption in just yourself and what you need and what you want, and you forget about other people and what their needs are. And certainly, while that is a foundational Buddhist principle, we also have it in the Christian perspective when we say that we should have a love for God and a love for neighbor. And we should love our neighbor as we love ourselves. So in a sense, it's a selfishness in terms of loving ourselves, but it transcends self and reaches out to the other person. And that would be the difference. So we go beyond our self-concern. And the Buddhists get into this tradition through what they call the mind training. In Tibetan, it's called Lojan, mind training. In the 12th century, teaching goes all the way back, and it says, all Dharma teachings agree on one point, lessening one's self-absorption. So the key to the Dharma teaching is that this self-absorption that we can get into, we have to lessen this. And we have to concentrate more on what can I do to help another person. And when we do that, it eliminates a lot of the suffering that we feel. It seems paradoxical in a way. You might say, well, I should be concerned about my own well-being and eliminating my own suffering, and what can I do to lessen my suffering, and can I take this medication, can I do this, that, and that? Buddhists would say no. What you can do to lessen your own suffering is to be more concerned about another human being. And when you are more concerned about others, you will find that your suffering is lessened. And even, the example with the man with the abdominal pain, you forget your own suffering. You might say, well, this person has this intense pain. How can it be totally eliminated? But it is because you're so concerned about somebody else, not about your own suffering.